back to Deb's Big Backyard on the Road. I'm Deb, and you know by now most of us understand the plight of the honeybee and how their numbers are in decline. But one thing I learned new recently after doing some bee research, attending a few conferences, and especially after observing the ecological gardening practices of Adrian Fisher of Oak Park, is that there are about 4,000 species of native bees in North America, and they're in trouble too. The other thing that I learned is that we as gardeners, if we switch up some of our gardening practices, we can help bring them back. Let's go see how. Hey Adrian, what are you standing around in your garden for?
Oh, I'm just bee spotting. When you are gardening for bees, you spend a lot of time just watching them. I see a honeybee right now, and I also see a little bumblebee kind of flitting around. Bees really like it when it's kind of warm and sunny and protected, and that's when you'll really start seeing them out. Like today is a nicer day, so probably you'll be seeing more bees than you would on a cool, rainy day.
In the media, there's been a lot of concern and finger pointing at the decline of the honeybee. But I also have come across that native bees or wild bees are also in decline.
They are.
And so why don't we talk about the difference of a honeybee population and the native bee populations?
The honeybee populations are kind of semi-domesticated. They live in hives that we provide for them, and we collect their honey. And there's a whole art and science to beekeeping, which I do not engage in because my job is to provide habitat.
Yes.
And providing habitat is one of the single most important things that anyone with a backyard can be doing right now, is providing habitat for bees. Native bees, the 4,000 species can go from an inch-long carpenter bee all the way down to tiny, tiny bees that are an eighth of an inch long. Habitat is simple. You provide flowering plants from April through October, preferably native. You don't use pesticides, you don't use insecticides because those are indicated in declines. And you provide kind of a messy garden. Bees are actually a perfect indicator of the quality of your garden.
Wow.
The better you are gardening in terms of your local ecosystem, the more bees and butterflies you will have. And they provide a very important service to the ecosystem because they pollinate the plants. They carry the nectar and pollen around, so they enable the plants to flourish. And if you didn't have bees, literally, most plants would start dying off.
So what makes this an ecological garden?
Well, because the whole yard actually functions as a tiny ecosystem that's a part of the larger Illinois, Chicago wilderness ecosystem in which we reside. And so the plants, the native plants here are native to the ecosystem. As I said, I've propagated a lot of them. The ground is actually healthy, very healthy soil because it was virgin prairie soil and full of organic matter, and I've maintained it that way. The polyculture is important. As many species as you can get in your yard is important. You want to put them in kind of groups so that, because bees are attracted to sort of large groups of plants. So you
should plant in batches. So.
Yeah, you would want to have bee balm, coreopsis, coneflower, black-eyed Susan, Culver's plant, Joe Pye weed, just all of the native flowering are all beneficial. So my grass is the despair of a lot of people, I would say. The interesting thing about this grass is I never water it. I don't mind weeds. I actually have planted clover so that the whole lawn does not function the way a lawn that is manicured, that they use synthetic inputs. That kind of a lawn is basically a biological desert, okay?
Yes.
There is no food for the pollinators. There is no biodiversity. And the soil is terrible because once you start adding synthetic nitrogen to soil, all the little critters that actually help plants grow well die. So really, if you manage a lawn in a healthy way and you understand that a lawn should have clover because the clover fixes nitrogen, it actually pulls nitrogen from the air and puts it into the soil in a way that the grass can use. And so it helps the grass be fertilized that way, and you don't have to apply fertilizer. And then in this lawn, I have little bulbs like snowdrops planted, and that's a non-native species, but they bloom early enough that when the queen bumblebees, and I have watched them do this, they kind of stagger up from under all the leaves that are in the garden beds.
Yeah.
And they fly around, and they fly and they rest, and they fly and they rest, and they're kind of staggering around, and they're looking for something to eat, and I've seen them on the snowdrops very early. Bumblebees are among the earliest to fly, earlier than honeybees. And so you want to provide that for them. And the same thing, this lawn is full of violets. People hate violets, but violets are A, the single host plant for the fritillary butterfly, and B, bumblebees use the flowers. Bumblebees and other bees use dandelions, so it's okay to have a few dandelions. The diversity is really important because if you have biodiversity in your plants, you will have biodiversity in your the kind of wildlife you attract, and you will have biodiversity under the soil because the soil is its own ecosystem. This is a bee plant that's a wonderful bee plant. This is called a cup plant, Silphium perfolatum. And it is a native prairie plant. It is native to this kind of an area because this was a sort of a damp prairie before the houses were built. And it likes damp soil. It will grow 8 feet tall, and it's perfolatum because the leaves grow together, yes. And you can see how they collect water. So insects and little birds like goldfinches, and you see actually an insect just went in there for the water. Whoops, he just went out. So it's a very good resource for tiny little creatures. But then the most amazing thing about it is it makes these yellow, kind of sunflower-like flowers that are kind of like this big. They're bright yellow. They are exactly the color of a goldfinch. And the other amazing thing about them is that they flower at about the time that the male bumblebees get kicked out of the nest. Oh. So you have all these little randy male bumblebees flying around, and they're kicked out of the nest and they have nowhere to go, and they camp out. And where they camp out, where they really like to camp out, is on cup plants.
I see.
And I will never forget the first time I discovered this, because I came out in the yard and I was looking at my beautiful cup plant and it was blooming, and I noticed what I thought were a bunch of dead bees. I was like, dead bees, what have I done? Oh, so I ran inside and looked on the computer. No, those were the young males camping out, and they sleep here.
They really just sleep?
Yes.
They just camp out and sleep on
They
your
really,
cup?
really
That
do.
is so cool.
They really, really do. And so what they do is they hang out here and they wait for the young queens, because the young queens providentially come out at about the same time. And they're waiting for these young queens to mate with. And my brother said, "Oh, you mean the cup plant is kind of like a pub?" And so there they are. And they mate, and then the young queens, then the males, unfortunately, they die. That's their job. And then the young queens start flying around and looking for places to overwinter.
Yes.
And that's where having a messy garden and some bare soil and plenty of leaf litter again becomes important, because what they do is they go and they kind of look for places where they can sleep all winter long.
Sure. Now in Oak Park or River Forest, and even into Chicago, with a larger yard like yours or even a smaller yard, what kind of native bees should we be attracting to our landscapes?
Well, I would say you put in the plants and then you see what shows up. I believe that as a citizen of the biotic community, it is my responsibility to help take care of the earth, and my entire life is actually centered around that.
Well, that about wraps up the buzz for today with Deb's Big Backyard on the Road. I'm Deb.
I'm Adrian.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.